Hi, thanks for coming out. Today, again, I'm moderating this panel about the concept of resistance in comics. Growing up, for me, I didn't exactly know what that meant. Growing up in the concept of, I'm a black kid growing up in Boston with a father who was from Honduras and a mother who was from Alabama. And when I saw in comic books things like King Kirby and Steve Ditko having Captain America punch Nazis in old 1960s, Marvel comics, which were retcons of stories from the 40s, or seeing them fight AIM and Hydra, or the Sons of the Serpent, I understood immediately, due to the fact that I was living in an existence where, black people had to fight for civil rights and just being treated like normal people. I got it. When I read things like the X-Men, I remember there was a comic book called God Loves Man Kills. In the beginning of God Loves Man Kills, these white men are hunting these young black kids, and then they kill them. But you realize in the next panel that they didn't kill them because they were black. They were killed because they were mutants. But they were both. And that instantly made me realize, wow, this is crazy. And then I found old comic books where Black Panther was fighting the Klan. But later on, I realized that the creators of these comic books were mostly white men, and they had blind sides and blind spots in terms of their perspective on what resistance is and writing it for different people. So later on, we get to the 70s and 80s, and then also we have the boom of independent comic books where women and black folks and Latinos and people from other backgrounds are able to write their own stories and form their idea of what resistance is and what it looks like and how it can hit and impact different people from different backgrounds. So as I grew up, I came more into understanding the idea of what resistance is and what it can be for future writers and creators coming forward. So this panel we have, I would like everybody to introduce themselves.
Marcus Kwame Anderson.
David F. Walker.
Greg Anderson, Elysee.
Ben Passmore.
All right, so the first question I pose to this panel is, can you think of your earliest or most impactful example of what you would term resistance in comics?
I would say, if I could start, I feel like probably some of the ones you cited, definitely God Loves Man Kills. I was a big X-Men kid, so yeah, that was early, and I was definitely aware of the parallels and the blind spots, as you said.
Yeah, I was more aware of the blind spots, and so it wasn't resistance so much as, because I was a very unusual child who grew up to be an unusual adult, and so from the very, very early age, I was informed by the things that I thought were wrong, right? And so one of the first black superheroes I ever saw was Luke Cage. It was this was back when comics were still 25 cents, and my cousin and I bought the copy at a 7-Eleven, and we were like so excited. But then we were like, yo, we don't know any black people that talk like this, right?
Christmas.
Yeah, and so that was sort of like my idea of resistance grew out of this childhood of like every time I saw black people, didn't matter if it was in comics, TV shows, movies, I was like, these are unlike any people I've ever known in my family, right? Even and I say this without any shame or whatever. I grew up around some really unscrupulous people, right? And like even the drug dealers in the movies were nothing like the drug dealers in my family. So I sort of set out from a really early. I didn't know how to articulate it then, but I knew. And I remember the day that it happened actually because I was watching Superman the movie in 1978, and it was like. Anyone who's seen Superman the movie knows the most famous scene in the movie is the scene with the pimp. And I remember being like 9, 10 years old going, oh no, this ain't working for me. Someday I'm gonna grow up and write pimps properly.
You should get a t-shirt that says that.
Wow. I don't know how to follow that, bro. I I'd say, I feel like for a lot of folks, X-Men is definitely an introduction to things like that. But even going into X-Men, I would say me growing up, as a queer bi dude struggling, seeing Colossus come out in Ultimate X-Men was like resistance for me. Because it was like, whoa, what the fuck? What's going on? And that was definitely a turning point where there's so much backlash over certain representation of either people of color or queer in comics, where just the existence of one is a form of resistance. And so I think I would use Ultimate Colossus coming out as definitely one of the first big ones for me growing up and reading that and seeing it.
Right. Okay. I think I have like today's brain too much, and I think as a kid, sort of like similarly, I was conscious that like that representation felt important. Like I was definitely scrounging around for black characters, but also I think there's a degree to which like fighting Nazis or like sort of vague approximations of Nazis are just part of like American culture in a way, but it's like we're fighting sort of like vague evil, but not ideas, and so in that way, it almost hits as nothing, you know what I mean? And for me, reading comics in the 90s, that grim, dark period, like I think it really, even when they were fighting Nazis, it wasn't clear they were fighting an idea. And so I didn't really I didn't feel pulled to think of the world differently necessarily. I think the first time I read comics that felt like insurgent was probably when I was reading it was like after 9/11, and I was institutionalized as like a teenager. So I got out of that situation and I was reading like World War III comics, about Bush and shit, about like demonstrations that were happening, comics that were writing about like the New York City like squatting movement, and being like, I'm not supposed to read this, you know what I mean? And also this is giving me some sense that maybe I should be moving differently. And in that way, it felt like comics inducing like a spirit of resistance versus like it giving me a bit of catharsis that lets me go along with the rest of my day.
Yeah, so next question is regarding what actually needs for there to be the ingredients that resonate with you as something that is a form of resistance. Like for some people, they read Mouse and it really hit them. For some people, it was Persepolis, Love and Rockets was that for some people. But for you as individually, what has to happen for it to resonate with you as being a legitimate form of resistance?
No, you go.
I definitely like read a wide array of books, but definitely like books that deal with resistance or political topics are powerful for me. I'm gonna use one example of Ben, who's here. So David and I, we co-created a book about the Black Panther Party, and it's a biographical historical book, which we're very proud of. But Ben's book, when I read it, it really resonated with me because he put himself in the story and told a personal story that was also a historical story. And he could speak to it way better than I can. But I would say that aspect of not only demonstrating these were the peoples and these were the resistance, but also being able to speak about impact and speak about ideas that people both stood for and stood against.
For me, there was this really crucial moment, and only like old people in the room will appreciate this, but we didn't know what most comic creators looked like when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew what Stan Lee looked like, but so you didn't know if a creator was black unless somehow you stumbled across a picture of them, right? And this was all the way up into the 90s, really. When Wizard magazine started changing because there'd be pictures of people, but there were always white people. But so in the early 90s, there was a book came out called Why I Hate Saturn by a guy named Kyle Baker. And I knew Kyle's work, but I didn't know who he was. But there's a picture of him in the back of the book, about the author, and I read the book, and there's a character in the book who's a black character who was unlike any black character I'd ever read in comics. And as I'm reading it, I was thinking, whoever did this, like, must know at least one black person. And I got to the back and I saw the picture of Kyle, and I was like, to me, that was like this revolutionary moment in comics. And so to me, it's what I'm looking for, and it's also like Ben's book. I'm always looking for something that I didn't know I needed until I've read it. I didn't know how much I was missing it until I saw it. And and that's what I'm always looking for. I'm either looking for that or something I really hate. The things that I love, it's like I'm not even trying to compete with it. I'm not trying to do what they're doing. I leave Greg's work to Greg and Ben's work to Ben. But when I hate something, oh man, then I am the king of like, I'm gonna pull that fruit off the tree, I'm gonna bite into the hate, I'm gonna let it give me the bubble guts, and then whatever comes out is gonna be a masterpiece. That's how I feel about it, so.
I think for me, what I would like to see is just authenticity.
Yeah.
I feel don't write from what you think it is to be like something, as opposed to just do your research. Do your research. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Ask them their experience, and also maybe even if you just write it out, have them read it, and they can tell you, this is not my experience, and this is actually my experience. And don't just see that one person as the viewpoint of whatever it is that you're writing about. Ask multiple people, because everyone has a different experience dealing with a similar issue. And I feel like once you read it, you can usually, same thing with David, seeing this authentically written black person in a way in this story is something that really seeps out at you, as opposed to somebody who is not of that maybe culture or that background writing it. Not to say you can't write it, but try to put some authenticity, some care into it.
I just want to second that, because I feel like all the books that we mentioned that we loved, that was the piece that was missing. I think is just the personal aspect of like, all right, if I'm going to write about black people, black resistance, or black people deal with queer people, anybody, like you can't do that from just having a kind of general picture in your mind of what that group of people is. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think for me, some of it has to do with like the consequences of like a piece of art's presence against like empire or hegemony. Like I think for me, starting young, and this is maybe going back on what I said in terms of like sort of like identity focused work. I think as a younger person reading like Icon or like Sag X, like I was conscious of like how white people felt about like a powerful black person, particularly in these cases, man, because of what I had seen in my regular life. I knew how mortifying that was to white people as a whole, right? So like I understood that, like as you were saying, like there was black characters created by white people that hit weird, you know what I mean? But like seeing black work by black people, I was like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like this has a consequence. And then as an older person, or like in, kind of getting older, I think something I think a lot about is not a comic, but thinking about like the classic like Panther art by IFCTE, Emory Douglas. I think some of the sheer something that is both exciting about Emory Douglas's work in the Black Panther newspaper, like the incredibly iconic works of like the women with the guns and the spears, is that even without a label, he's depicting real people. You know what I mean? Like you don't even because we know there's a movement, right? Like we understand that there's a culture of insurgency happening, even if you don't know about the Mau Mau's. And I think for me, like a work is really only as revolutionary as its connection to a movement that is out there, and for me, I think, I came into politics through like black nationalism first, just as like someone studying, and then my first sort of lived sort of relationship to radical politics was anarchism, you know, and that's all about like, okay, you got this ideas, what are you gonna do right now yourself? It's you first, right? Like there's no one's coming to save you. And I think for me, my work, like I look for work, like there's Gord Hill, he did a book called like, I think it was just called like Anti-Fascism, and he tracks like the full movement, anti-fascist movement coming out of Weimar Germany and stuff. And it's like one of these things where it's like, I think it feels revolutionary because it feels living, you know what I mean? And it feels like there's a consequence, right? Like he made this even, Antifa is deeply unpopular, you know what I mean? And it's always kind of been deeply unpopular. So like making work where you're like, there's a real consequence to this existing, that's when it feels like revolutionary to me.
So we're going to get into independent books and all these other things in terms of like what resistance really is in terms of pieces, art, graphic novels, comic books written by people who said there's a void. We need something to fill this space that really resonates with people. We're going to make it. But I'm going to ask a question to break up the tension here.
You made it tense.
And this is a question some of you will see coming if you know me. And if you've been in front of me for the last 10, 15 minutes, you're pretty sure you knew this was coming.
Okay.
I want each of you to pick a specific space or moment or a comic book or an issue or a thing that happened within the entire timeline of X-Men where you realized this breaks with the idea of what resistance is supposed to be. Someone said, "Whoa."
X-Men in particular.
Yeah, well, X-Men, the extended universe.
Extended universe.
It breaks with what resistance is supposed to
Yes,
be?
because the idea of that Stan Lee put forth, if I have to explain
Right.
further, what Stan Lee put forth was that it was an allegory. You know,
Right.
it was the idea of Martin Luther King Jr. By the way, it's April 4th, and Malcolm X.
But that's not.
See?
Yes, yes,
See?
yes, yes.
That's where I'm
it's not
getting.
a real
That's where I was-
dichotomy.
That's what we
Yeah,
wanted. So, all right. So,
So-
you go.
It's, I mean, that analogy became popular like in the 90s going into the 2000s, and then when they made the movie, they jumped upon that and said, oh no, this is what he was doing. And he wasn't doing any of that, you know, in part because when you, like, hardly anybody even knew who Malcolm X was when the X-Men were created.
Yes.
Right? And Magneto headed an organization called the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. That's like, that would be like if Malcolm X was in the Brotherhood of Evil Negroes, right? So, but I understand why people draw from it, and why so many people across so many spectrums, whether it's people of color or queer folks or trans folks, really gravitate to the X-Men, because what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, even more than Stan, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Jack just had his head down and he was drawn, but he was a true genius. It was about being an outsider and the other, right? And they both were, you're talking about, they started their careers as young Jewish men in an industry that was populated largely by Jewish creators who could not get work anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
And that the story of oppression can be very universal if it's told right. And, you know, there's a biography about Stan Lee where if you read it, I think Danny Fingeroth wrote it, like, all of a sudden you're like, yo, shit, Stan Lee was Peter Parker, right? He was Peter Parker. He was this teenage kid who was forced to work for his tyrant uncle who was not allowed to do anything he wanted to do, and you're just like, oh, that's Peter Parker, that's Stan Lee. But for me, with the X-Men, it was always like, it wasn't X-Men that did it for me, so I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. It was Star Trek, right? And with Star Trek was, like, the original series was Mr. Spock. That was a character that, like, I always related to. Then with Next Generation, it became Worf and Data. And it's always the characters whose humanity is always being called into question. And I don't want to speak for anyone else on this panel or in this room, but I grew up always having my humanity questioned. And so those characters, and that's why the X-Men are so universal, because just about everybody in this room has had a moment where you were made to feel less than a human being because of the color of your skin or your gender or who you choose to love. And that's like, the moment that happens to you, I feel like you're born into resistance. It's almost genetically in you. And even if you don't realize it, it's why you're always looking for the things you're looking for. You're looking for the community, you know?
Yeah. I could believe Elijah Muhammad as Magneto. Not to press too hard, but yeah, I agree. Like I think that sort of like transposing Malcolm X and Martin Luther King onto those misunderstands their politics, of course, and also creates like a tension that misunderstands the tension that did exist. You know what I mean? And really, their politics. You know, but of course, I mean, it wouldn't be America without washing out like analysis. You know what I mean? I think if I'm trying to remember all of the X-Men that I read as a teenager. I get kicked in the head a lot, so I don't remember a lot of stuff.
I get kicked in the head, and I don't remember it either.
Okay,
So.
maybe I'm just dumb, but I think the characters that broke. I think it's just so difficult because I didn't have high expectations of the X-Men.
Okay.
This, I think I couldn't really relate to them as a resistance movement at the end of the day because they were trying to be a part of the state. That they would collaborate with the president, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that wasn't, even as a young person, I didn't recognize that as like the way insurgencies really look, you know what I mean? The characters I feel, so it didn't break with me. I think the characters I would relate to is like Bishop, like people that are coming from the dark future, because I was like, this man understands the consequences of this struggle, you know what I mean? Like, and I know Greg's ready to disagree with me, but this is
I'll talk after.
Yeah. This end of sentence. Feel free to yell.
No. I mean, all right. So I think as a concept and growing up, I love the concept of X-Men,
Yes.
and they're fun. They're fun to read. My biggest pet peeve is people trying to connect Malcolm X with Magneto. And I say that as somebody who loves Magneto. I think he is a brilliantly written character. But it's just like when you go back to the original stories, this motherfucker was terrible.
He was. There was
You know?
nothing.
Yeah.
There was no nuance. He was this
Yeah.
megalomaniac. He was psychotic. And then the fact that especially a lot of black people is like so excited to equate him with Malcolm X. It's like, yeah, Stan Lee based him off. I'm like, did you read
Yeah.
these original stories?
Even before like X-Men 250, I think it was, where suddenly he was a concentration camp survivor.
Yeah.
Suddenly.
And it's like, to me, I'm just like, come on. It's like I get the romanticism of it, but at the same time, it's like, come on, let's not do this.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's just like, you're happy to equate this megalomaniac with Malcolm X. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of those things where I've learned to not argue with people online anymore because that used to be my thing. But that's one of those things where I'm just like, I need to get back in the ring. And also, I actually love the Bishop character, but it's also one of those things where as I've gotten older and look back, it's almost like he's a bit of a coon. Because I'm sorry.
Just kidding.
And it's one of those things where it's like, if I were to ever write for X-Men, one of my things would be like, I would love to like decoonify because I love the character in general. Especially he was like one of the first black male superheroes I was introduced to as a kid. But it's the fact of like, yeah, you're coming from the future, you want to save the mutants and all that other stuff, but he literally was a cop for the oppressors capturing the mutants.
Okay, that's
and putting them also in the camps, and it's like, huh? We cool with that? But yeah, as a whole, and another thing I guess that breaks me with X-Men is you're reading all these stories about resistance and being oppressed,
Yes.
but they're always being written by the white man. And it's like, how often are you going to find an X-Men story where the lead writer is black or queer? Like maybe they'll write a little side story or a spin-off, but the actual X-Men books,
Run.
they're always written by these white men
Yeah.
talking about what oppression is.
Well, they know that.
I know, of course. And so that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I love X-Men, but like looking at it critically, there's always something that's just like, yeah.
If I could, real quick, because I mean, we talked a lot about the Malcolm misrepresentation, but there's Martin as well. You know, because, and I forget who cited it, but the two weren't really as different as people make it out to at the end of the day, especially as far as what they wanted to see. And you know, Martin during his lifetime was like one of the most hated people in the country.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea, the cleansing of Martin, you know, that happened much later, wasn't even a reality in '63. You know, so it's also pre-sanitizing Martin to fit a narrative.
Exactly.
And then, you know, you look at Martin's politics like at the end of his life, you know, and yeah, he was much closer to Malcolm. He's much closer to a lot of the things that a lot of us are asking for in our movements today.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it's kind of like sanding off the rough edges of what made them revolutionary individuals.
And it sounds so like nice and cute and whatever, but the moment you give it any thought, and it also, I think it helps if you're a little bit older and just remember things like, again, the moment I heard people say, yeah, Magneto's Malcolm X, I was like, no, the leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Like that, like I almost turn into Greg without the abs and the looking real fly. If you haven't seen a picture of him with no shirt on doing
I knew
his
that was coming.
workouts,
I knew this was transitioning.
you will discover stuff about yourself that you didn't know. So I'm just giving,
You gotta
he's
change
also a
the
great
settings.
writer too, though. He's not, I don't want to turn him into a
change the
piece of
settings.
meat that I'm gonna, you know.
What was the question again?
All right, so I'm glad we went down that path. So,
Really?
so
Okay.
the next question is, shifting gears, I need you each to name either a graphic novel or a comic book or a run in this space that truly encompasses the idea of resistance to you.
I'm just gonna throw out the first title that popped into my head. Really, was probably Love and Rockets, right? Because Love and Rockets was it, especially if you were seeing it when it was first coming out.
Absolutely.
You know, like all those indie comics that were coming out into the 80s and 90s, like I was looking for things that I didn't see anywhere else. And Love and Rockets felt like that. And now, 30, 40 years later, it still feels like that. And so I would have to say, for me, it was like, oh, okay, wait. And it was also like, oh, you can do this?
Yeah.
You know, there was always these indie comics that would pop up, especially for me in the early 80s, where it was like even ElfQuest was like, yo, what is this? Now I can look back at ElfQuest and pick out all things I don't much care for, but it was like, there was also Love and Rockets, ElfQuest, some of those titles were the ones that showed me, oh, you can make comics on your own. And that to me was like, wait a sec. I mean, I was meeting these creators at conventions in the late 70s, early 80s, and I'm going, wait a sec, there's more to life than Marvel and DC, and you can go out and raise some money somehow and print stuff up yourself, and that to me was like, even as a kid, was this incredibly revolutionary idea. And that's why I tell people now, like, if you're fortunate enough to work for Marvel and DC, and I've been there, you're only going to get to be so revolutionary.
Yeah.
Because all you're doing is figuring out a better way to pick more cotton for them. You're reinventing the cotton gin is what you're doing. I just said that out loud. So yeah.
For me,
Can you repeat that?
I feel like this, unfortunately, is an easy answer, but it's a relevant one and it's real. Definitely, like for me, Milestone Comics. So like when I was a teenager, and not just because you saw like black faces, Latino faces. It's because I'm thinking about books like Blood Syndicate, right? Blood Syndicate was a gang, and but there's so much going on in that book, right? Because just the individuals represented were so diverse, even though yes, they were black and brown, and but you had just it showed the diversity of us. It showed the way that they're impacted by their local government, by the investment in their community of Paris Island. Like the bridge literally had been blown up, between Paris Island and the rest of Dakota. And so when you think about bridges and the highway system and the way that they cut off communities, like that symbolism to me is just so dope. And and then you had issues where they just were way ahead of their time. Like Blood Syndicate had gender fluid characters, queer characters, and so it was just kind of shattering a lot of ideas about like what black and brown characters can be and who we are. I could go on about all the milestone books, but for me they were impactful, and for me that was part of like what I got to tell my stories.
I'd say for me an example that just pops in my head is The Hole by John Jennings and Damian Duffy. Because one thing, it was like a subtextual also response to how voodoo and black spirituality is represented, especially throughout the years by the media. It being showcased as something so exotic that it's almost scary and evil to be showcased, and seeing that book sort of go into it, celebrating it as well as like commentary, but also commentary on the fetishizations of the black male body, I think was something I didn't really see before, in comics especially. And so reading that and having a copy of that is just like, holy shit, this is really, really cool, of all the different ways that you can tackle so many different topics and mature topics in the comic world within art. And so that's one of the first images I guess I could think of resistance in that sense.
Right. I don't really read comic books, so no. This is the easy one, but it was really important for me in the last couple of years. But there's this book. It's about Martin Luther King. It's called King. It's by Ho Che Anderson. If y'all know it, it's like probably like one of the most. It's probably like one of the best biographical comics I've ever read. I think it's like amazingly drawn. I think he also like I think I was working on Black Arms when I read it. So I was like another thing where it's like he's writing and drawing at the same time, which I was like, let me find evidence that this is actually possible and I'm not just going to go crazy. Because I was having a nervous breakdown. But I think for me, I think my personal definitions for like resistance are like probably pretty narrow, like maybe unnecessarily so. But I think what I find really impressive about what he does is that he has the bravery to try to depict Dr. King as a person. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, and like both like just sort of like his mark making, like the ways in which like he avoids like iconic depictions. He avoids the big moments that we know about. To try to give us like a very textured view of someone, and tries to really sort of talk about his ideas and where they come from. And I think those are the things that ultimately like give us enough food to move with. I sort of like, I was thinking about how I went to the MoMA like in New York. I think that's it. It's like an art museum. It's like an art museum. I was walking around with my friend Ron Wimberly.
Oh yeah.
And I was supposed to do.
That's a scary duo, the two of you. I'd write a comic about the two of you together.
Right, two snooty niggas. But so we're walking around the museum, and this is basically the story. But so I was hired by the MoMA to make a comic about like one of the galleries, right? And they have a lot of like, I think they had a lot of what is it? It's like French Nouveau. They had like a bunch of art that I've seen printed on mugs and like, you know, and shit like that. And we walked through all these galleries and I look up and I realize I hadn't looked at anything. You know what I mean? All this stuff that like I've seen before, right? But it's the first time seeing it in person. And I was like, I realized I've been so overexposed to this imagery that seeing it in reality means nothing. And I think a lot about the ways that we receive biography in that way, that we're so used to, like, we've been overexposed to the big moments that their impact and the implication means like almost nothing. We just know them to be big moments. You know what I mean? So then it becomes acceptable to be like, oh yeah, Professor X is MLK, and you know, fucking Magneto is Malcolm X, because we've been trained to know nothing, and to not think very specifically about like what things mean and what people believe. So I liked that really. I liked that Ho-Che did that, and you know, consequently, I feel like it's an underappreciated book.
And I feel like the whole was very important because it completely changed how Marvel made Brother Voodoo to Dr. Voodoo to using his actual name and then removing him controlling his brother, you know, and sending him to the spirit world, and then he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme.
Sorcerer Supreme, yeah.
So like, I feel like that kind of shamed the Marvel creators into being like, all right, we have to change the way we represent this character. You know, so I think all those things are like extremely important. Now, I've grown up seeing women written horribly, reading comic books where they have storylines where people say things that real people never would say, react in ways that don't fly in actual society, or you know, interpersonal or intrapersonal communications that just like, have you been around people? You know, have you been in a society? Do you have friends? Do you even have enemies? Damn.
They're cartoonists, so they may not have friends.
So I feel like when I was growing up, I was like, I can't wait till I'm able to write something that people will say, see, that's how humans actually are or aren't, right? And so I would like to ask you all, for all of your years of reading, of being in the space, reading media, and seeing the changes that have happened and the regressions that have also happened in this space, what hasn't happened yet on a consistent basis that you think needs to happen? Yes.
I would say just a substantial centering of other voices. There's in comics, there's no shortage of black, all the shades of marginalization. There's creators from all those groups but that being said, there's barriers, and so I would say, you know, obviously the discussion about equity versus equality is an ongoing one.
Yeah.
But to me, what has not happened is a move towards making comics equitable for all people, for marginalized people, period. And there's a lot of things that would need to take place for that to happen. But that's the big one for me, because you know, we're grinding, we're telling our stories, but there's a lot of barriers, and so that's what it is to me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's going back to one of you said something about cartoonists. Maybe they haven't had a significant other or seen anyone naked in real life.
That was great.
You know?
That was great. I would never say that.
But the thing I think that's really interesting to me is like this inability to write the other as full human beings, right? And it means you're a lazy writer and you're also a lazy person, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if I'm going to have a character in my story who's queer, I'm not just going to watch Will and Grace or something like that. I'm going to talk to, first I'm going to write a human being, right? But I'm also going to talk to people, you know, I'm going to, reach out to folks. I'm going to do research, and I'm always going to, and I say this to people all the time. I have a character I was working on for a story who's trans, and so I put the feelers out. I said, I want to talk to some trans folks. And the first thing I said to everybody was, I'm going to ask you stupid questions that are embarrassing for me to ask, but I want to make sure I don't get it wrong, right? And it's like, if you can't do that, right? Like if you want to write, a paramedic, a story about a paramedic, go talk to paramedics. Find somebody. It's like, it isn't research if you're trying to learn more about other human beings. It's just being a part of the human community. So the thing that drives me nuts is, because I know some of these people, I'm like, yo, man, you haven't even left your house in 6 years, right? You're the most antisocial person I know. Like, go out and meet some people. Maybe your life will be better. You learn how to shower a little bit. But that's the thing. It's like, you're trying to, like, entertain people, but in doing that, you can also be alienating them, right? They're like, the moment you get outside of your comfort zone, you run the risk of dehumanizing other people. Now, if that's your goal, is to dehumanize them, okay, that's fine. But I don't think most of us as creators want to do that. Even if you're trying to, like, that's why there's such great complex villains now, mostly in, like, in film. When you watch them, you're like, wow, that's, like, well, why is Killmonger so interesting? It's because they gave him some semblance of humanity, as opposed to just the mustache twirling villain who wants to just kill for no reason, right? I'm going to blow up the world. Why? Because I'm going to blow up the world, because it sounds evil. No, it's bullshit, and it's bad storytelling.
What do I want to see? I want to see queer niggas doing shit. I'm sorry. Like, can you name me one black queer hero in any type of story? In like a speculative fiction? Nah, you can't. And it's like, if you do, it's like real indie.
Yeah.
And you'll never really see that. And there's always some type of trauma associated if they're showcased in something. Them being ostracized in their black friend group in some way, or their love interest dies, or some shit. Or they gotta hide it. And it's just like, bro, I'm tired of this story. We see this all the freaking time. Or they're always the side character, or the main male character has to accept their friend for being what they are. And it's just like, can we get one where, they're the blade of the story, hunting down, creatures and monsters, and they just so happen to have, a side piece or something. We talk about like romanticizing people, but I feel like a lot of marginalized groups is like, we're like, oh yeah, they're showcased, they're in this movie, they're side characters, but they're never like human as the main characters.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I would like to see more of.
I think you should write a comic called Diary of a Side Piece.
Diary of a Side
Yeah,
Piece?
but it's like, and it's the sidekick, and he's the side piece. And
Can I get like one of those ad quotes for you in the top?
you got
To
it.
sell-
Oh yeah,
You saw
No,
it.
that's
It was
good
There's
business.
gonna be a
Right
bunch
here.
of book blurbs.
Yeah.
That's good business. You should learn from that. He was like, okay, but Eisner winner. Better get that quote. That was great. I think. I guess I'm not going to answer the question, but I feel like it has an effect. But like, so something I think a lot about, maybe because I feel like fairly inside the bubble of publishing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like they very much are not interested in any of the things we want to make unless it's in those periods of time where it seems like maybe it'll make something.
Published author, I get it.
Yeah, it's like I think for me, like when I was younger, everything I published this book through Pantheon, and starting in college, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Pantheon published graphic novelist. You know what I mean? I wanted to be a big deal. You know what I mean? And I got it, and it means basically nothing. You know what I mean? And I think in the course of me like hunting for that, I think I came to appreciate that the best work comes out of vibrant communities that are largely trying to build themselves and build really good stories. So I feel like what I would like to see is less people sort of having these like superstar dreams of being a cartoonist, because it's not going to happen for the majority of people. What ends up happening by accident is that you build community, you put out a couple of things that you really like, and that's probably all you're going to put out. I think what I would like to see is a lot more people try to put together guilds, drink and draws, try to work out through those groups, right? Try to start like little zine fests in your area, in your neighborhood, in your city. You know what I mean? Go out to the other ones, support different people, and try to decentralize a lot of this shit. You know what I mean? Because there's not really a whole lot of money in it. I feel like I'm fairly successful, and I meet people every day who are better than me that won't be as successful as me. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna rent my entire life. You know what I mean?
That's the worst. When you realize all of a sudden, like, I'm never gonna have to deal with a mortgage, but I'm gonna be paying rent every month for the rest of my life.
I might squat again though. That was a great move. Stealing houses was amazing. If people would be like, "How were you able to be a successful published cartoonist?" I stole a house for years and food. So also add that to the thing I said before: groups of people making comics together, publishing, making zine events, and stealing houses. These are all really important.
I love that.
Yeah, and I think great stories will come out of that. You know what I mean? And less of this like nostalgic like hyper reality that is like so skewed to like the white culture. You know what I mean? That holds all the money. Like we ain't never gonna get paid, most of us, and I think we should just make good fucking work.
Okay, so I had another question, but it's been answered. So I think I would like to open it up to questions from the assembled throng of people here. Does anybody have any questions for the panel?
Will there be, okay, like, after that bit of roots, will there be like a series or cartoon thing coming out with that? Or any of you guys work, you might plan it to make it like a movie or a cartoon or anything like that?
They talk about it, and you know, I think the 4 greatest words ever spoken in the history of film was in the movie Goodfellas. Fuck you, pay me. And so people come to us and say, hey, we want to do a Bitter Root movie. I'm like, okay, give us some money and you go do whatever you want to do. I don't have any interest in working on the movie because I don't have any interest in working in Hollywood at that level. So just give me the money so I can pay my rent because I'm never going to have a mortgage. But yeah, and we're in terms of the comic, we're always trying to get our act together, the 3 of us, Chuck, Sanford, and I. And so, you know, we have some stuff coming next year. But yeah, the interest is there. But it's you know, going back to what was said on this panel, it's like the interest in I guess for lack of a better term, the Black experience, like it waxes and wanes in the entertainment world, right? So it was like everyone's looking for the next Sinners, but nobody wants to pay for the next Sinners, right? And also they don't want to replicate the business deal that Cougar had, right?
Yeah, that's a big part.
And so that's been for me. I'm like, oh no, you done messed up.
Yeah.
You gave Ryan that deal.
Yeah.
And so I'm, you know, I was telling somebody earlier, it's like I pay attention to what happens behind closed doors deals, and it's like, oh no, if you can't give me at least this, there's no reason for us to be talking right now.
Yeah. And it's not resistance, right? That's like you could maybe get some good money off of optioning, but that's whatever. I agree. I got a really good deal in this publishing deal. I'll never get that again. Because again, it's like, you gave me too much money and I did exactly what I wanted. You know what I mean? So I think the best thing to do is just wait for it.
Yep. Yes, Yama?
Yeah. First of all, thank you all. This is a black nerd. Like, woke up this morning, I was like, oh man, this is so dope. So thank you all for being here. This is like really important for our community in Boston. This is specifically for you, David, Mr. Walker, if I can call you. I was watching you on Blur Cave a couple weeks ago, and I love you say a little bit more about you extolled us, young artists, specifically, or artists who are looking to kind of get put on in that paradigm, and you were successfully really brilliant. If you're giving, the big 2, like your best work, you probably should do like your best work for yourself, so that when you're done with that project, they can come back and see what you're generating on your own. And I think it resonates with a lot of what people are saying. A lot of all your producing really beautiful work as independent creators, and I love that. I wonder if you can say a little bit more to the artists and creators in this space about the power of attracting like bigger deals through like just doing the shit you don't do?
Well, the thing is if you get a big deal somewhere, first off, you're only going to get there by working towards it, right? Because the big companies, Marvel, DC, never give anybody a break right off the bat, right? But working for those companies comes with all these hang-ups, all these problems, and one of them is they don't pay you fairly, and you don't own any of the stuff that you do. So you are, in fact, a sharecropper, right? They will make a lot of money off of you, and you'll be sitting around going, oh, man, how come I can't pay rent? And this character I created is in a movie or a TV show, which is what happened to me. And I have to fight to get my money, and then coming up with a bunch of bullshit excuses of like, well, you didn't really create this character. This character goes back to a character who appeared in one panel in a comic in the 1970s. And I'm like, yo, like, you aren't even good criminals. I was raised by better criminals than this, right? So the thing is if you do what we all do, and what some of you all do, or some of you aspire to do, it's like you're never going to feel as good as when you're doing your own thing, right? And so I'll say it in a less cynical way. If you wanted to make music, you can be in a cover band and you can play somebody else's music, but you're always going to be playing somebody else's music, right? As opposed to making your own real music. And when you make your own real music, you are expressing yourself in a way that is unique to yourself, right? So now I write, I don't draw. I have to partner up with someone, partner up with Marcus, and it's like the best work I've ever done in my career is with Marcus, right? He understands me, I understand him, and that's it. But if you're aspiring to work for somebody else so they can pay you a little bit of money and make a lot of money off of you, then yeah, go ahead and be with Marvel or DC. But then what happens is you fall out of favor with them, and then the next thing you know, you're where I'm at right now in my career, where it's like, okay, I got to figure out how to survive. I got to figure out how to pay the bills, and it's fun a little bit, but again, it's like not as fun as people think, because they'll say dumb shit to you. That's like, when they say, well, I don't understand, why is Nighthawk trying to kill the white supremacists? What's wrong with that? And you have to look at your editor and go, yeah, I'm not going to explain white supremacy to you. I do not have the time. It's above my pay grade. But clearly, you shouldn't have a job.
That was a great book, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes?
You guys have offered such tasty nuggets. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, each of you. I want to offer one back. So I was talking to Afua Richardson yesterday after the panel, and I brought up the question to her about how the industry determines who gets visibility in comics. She was the one who went on the panel yesterday. There were none today. And I'm working on a retelling of the story of the Black Panther Party. I'm an artist as well. That was actually my comic book teacher at the Boston Arts Academy. I found myself in this tension between, I was a product of Black nationalism. Dad was a Mau Mau. Grandparents joined the Nation of Islam in the 50s, up from Vicksburg, Mississippi. And I found this tension between knowing what those movements were about, having been raised inside of them, but also feeling and experiencing all the fucked up misogynistic shit that happened. And there's a story that happens inside the story. So the nugget I want to offer you is a book that I found, or a book that found me, in a used bookstore somewhere, I don't remember where. Paula Giddens, Professor Paula Giddens, who's over at Smith College right here in Massachusetts, wrote a book the year before I was born, in '84, called When and Where I Enter. When and Where I Enter. If you ever intend to depict a Black woman in any of your work, please at least Google that book.
Okay. Now,
Read a page from it. The subtitle is Black Women's Impact on Race and Sex in America. You have to read it.
Okay, I'll read it, but I'm going to throw something back at you.
Yes, please.
You need to make something.
I am.
Come down to my table, we'll talk about it, but I
Yes.
believe that, I go back to what Toni Morrison said, if there's a book you want to read and it's not out there, it's up to you to make it,
Write it, yeah.
right? And I've been saying this for so long, it's like, we need more voices, right? And I sit in the meetings and I go like, yo, here's a person who I know can do this, and we always get the pat answers. It's
Right.
always like, well, I've never heard of this person. Well, I don't really give a shit who you've heard of.
Right.
Like I come down, I will tell you knockdown, drag out stories. Marcus has heard most of them, where it always comes down to, well, I've never heard of this person. And this person is always a person of color, woman, queer, non-binary, whatever. And it's like, your limited scope of what you know couldn't fill a thimble, and I'm not going to let you destroy my book. Look, I'm the biggest egomaniac in this room. And I had to say this to somebody. I said, your name's not the one on this fucking book. You don't tell me what goes into it.
I like that tension.
Yeah,
I like
and
that.
it was like,
I like that.
and again, Marcus knows the story. I had to do something I never thought I'd have to do in my life. I had to get someone fired from a job because I was like, you're going to ruin my book because you think you know more than me. And I'm not that person, right? But we've all had that moment where, like, all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're like, wait, what's happened to my hand? I'm feeling the need to slap somebody. I've never slapped anybody before. You have brought this out in me.
Yeah.
And I know if I've got that feeling coming from a place of privilege as just a man, right? Like, yeah, I can be a man of color, but being a man gives me privilege in this country, right? It's like, if I have that feeling, I'm looking around this room and I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of you, I know you got that feeling even more, right? And so I always say to people, yo, if you got to get in a fight, just come get me. Because I'll be standing in the back with the lead pipe, and if I feel you're outnumbered, I'll just whoop some ass for you.
Also, just real quick, is there time? Sorry, never mind.
All right, so thank you all for coming out, and thank you to this wonderful panel and this amazing discussion. I'm Darnell.